Okay, this lesson is for your Module 7. It covers the trigonometry. So the first thing that you are told, and these are abbreviations here, okay, is the relationship or the ratios. Sine, it's abbreviated SIN, it actually has an E. So sine equals opposite over hypotenuse, cosine equals adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent equals opposite over adjacent. So you can see it's important that you recognize the hypotenuse. These trig ratios are only good for right triangles. So which one of these is the hypotenuse? It's always the one across from the right angle. Okay, here's my right angle. That's the hypotenuse. Here's my right angle. This is the hypotenuse, okay? Super important that you understand that since you need to use those numbers. Now, let's talk about opposite and adjacent. So if here's my angle, and that angle is made by two lines. Well, we've already said the blue one's the hypotenuse, so this one is adjacent to it. It touches the x, okay? So this would be the adjacent. It's adjacent to the x. Let's say I put y on this one. Okay, which one touches y? The hypotenuse does, but this one does too. So this one would be the adjacent side. Okay, and let's use z. All right, so here's my hypotenuse. This side is the one that makes the angle. So this is the adjacent side. Remember, adjacent means next to. So if this forms my angle and this is adjacent, then the one that doesn't form the angle is opposite the angle. So that's why these are the opposite. Okay, so this one's opposite and this one is opposite. Alright, so the sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So in this case, it would be this side. Sorry, I thought that was a highlighter. That side. It's opposite over adjacent. Okay. So in the second picture, let's talk about cosine in the second picture. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. This is the hypotenuse and this is the side adjacent. Alright, so. And tangent uses the opposite over adjacent. So here's z, this is adjacent. It doesn't say hypotenuse, it says opposite. So this is the one opposite. Okay, so now let's apply this. In that first problem, it says to find this side. So first of all, I have to look at what I have. I have a 32-degree angle, and I have a hypotenuse that always goes underneath. It's 60, and you decide, am I looking for the adjacent or the opposite? I'm looking for the opposite. That means I need to use sine. So the sine of 32 equals x over 60. I don't know if you'll be able to see this. Alright, so this is my scientific calculator. And so what I do is I push sine, forgot what it was, 32, enter. And it gives me, I'm going to round up, it says 0.52999 something. So I'm going to put 0.53. 0.53 equals a number divided by 60. I'm trying to solve and I'm going to use my algebra. If I have x being divided, I do the inverse. So I multiply both sides by 60. Okay, so on the calculator, I've got 0.53 times 60, and that gives me 31.8 feet. That is the answer to that problem. Okay, so let's look at this problem right here. We've got 49 degrees. Let me work it out here. It's my angle. My hypotenuse is unknown. Oops. Sorry. My hypotenuse goes underneath, right? Hypotenuse is underneath. And I know the side, is this opposite 49 or adjacent? It's adjacent. Okay, so if I'm using adjacent and hypotenuse, go back up here, that means cosine. So I'm going to use cosine 49. So in my calculator, my light's gone out. On the calculator, I put cosine 49. 0.66. Okay, so 0.66 equals 10 over x. I want to get x by itself, so I'm going to do this at once. I'm going to multiply x over here, and I'm going to multiply x over here. Now all I found, x is still not by itself. I need to divide by 0.66. So I'm going to divide 10 by 0.66. And x equals, we already know it's longer than 10 feet, right? Because it's a hypotenuse, which is the longest side. So 10 divided by 0.66 is 15.2. So this is the answer for that one. All right, that was a little more complicated in solving because it took 2 steps instead of the 1. So let's look at our last one. Okay, I want to find x. I have 25 degrees. This is the hypotenuse. There's nothing written on here. So I know I'm not going to use sine or cosine. I'm going to use tangent. So here's 25. The side opposite is 28. And the one I'm looking for, the adjacent, is x. Okay, this is the tangent ratio. So first thing you do is you go to your scientific calculator and you put in the tangent of 25 and you get 0.47 equals 28 divided by x. X is in the denominator. I need it up in the numerator. I'm going to multiply by x, but I do it on both sides. Now I have x times 0.47 equals 28. X is not by itself, so I divide by 0.47, divide by 0.47, and x equals 28 divided by 0.47, 59.6. 59.6. So that's x. That's how you use sine, cosine, and tangent. Alright, so you were also asked to learn about, let me see if I can pause this. Alright, in this module they also introduced 3 of these other ones. I never use them because they're based off of this. I'm used to learning these. But they do want you to know that cosecant is hypotenuse over opposite. And secant is hypotenuse over adjacent. And cotangent equals adjacent over opposite. So notice these two are just the inverse. Okay, they just flipped it. And the reason I don't use these is I don't have those buttons on my calculator. I have these buttons, so that's why we usually use these. I think I could find them if I looked real hard, but I don't have these, so I use this one instead of the inverse. Okay, you're still going to get the same answer. Alright, this is a simple concept. In reality, it might seem confusing. So, it talks about the relationship between the sine and cosine of complementary angles. We know my triangle adds up to 180. This is 90. So x plus y must equal 90. This could be 10 and 80, 20 and 70, 45, 45, I don't know. It doesn't matter. So let's say I want to find the cosine of x. The cosine of x, remember it's adjacent over hypotenuse. So BC over the hypotenuse AC. Now compare that to the sine of y. Remember we said x plus y add up to 90? That means they're complementary angles. So the sine of y, sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So y, the opposite is BC, and the hypotenuse is AC. Notice how these are the same. The sine of one is congruent or equal to the cosine of the other. That's their relationship. Okay, the last thing I want to show you is how you find an angle measure using this. Okay, I've been giving you the angles. Let's say you're searching for the angle. Alright, so let's say this is 7 and this is 10. Let's make it feet. Alright, so I have the opposite over the hypotenuse. Remember that's sine. So the sine of x degrees equals the opposite over the hypotenuse. So the sine of x equals 7 divided by 10. 7 divided by 10 is, I should have known that, 0.7. Alright, I don't want the sine of x, I want x. Okay, so I need to find the inverse. I need to find the inverse as looks like this. Okay, that cancels this out, but then I have to do the same thing over here. Okay, so here's what we do on our calculator. Mine's a scientific calculator. Alright, here's the sine button. Move it up here a little. Here's my sine button. I want to use the inverse of it. I don't want the sine of x. I need to get rid of it. So I'm going to do second sine. Notice my little -1 showing up here. What was the number? 0.7? 0.7. 44.4. And this would be in feet. No, this would be degrees. Sorry, that's an angle. Okay? So when you're looking for the angle, you must use the inverse button on your calculator. Alright, here's sine, cosine, and tangent. So if I want the inverse of cosine, I type in the decimal usually. It'll be a decimal. Less than 1. And then I push equal. Okay? When finding the angle, use the inverse. Remember, there's a lot covered in this. Go back through it, pause, take notes, do what you need. And I'm dedicating this video to Bernard.